This is Jill Berlin with the Find Your Voice Government 101 series. We are here with Congressman Morgan Griffith. Thank you so much for talking with us. It is so important to educate constituents on what's going on, why it's happening, and how it's happening, because their voice is important too, obviously.
Absolutely. And we did not talk about this, but my mother was a school teacher.
Really?
She's obviously now passed away. But she was a school teacher. She taught sixth grade for many, many years. She wanted her kids to be aware of what was going on. And when I first started doing politics in high school, she said, if you ever get elected, make sure you go and talk to the students, because too many elected officials don't pay attention to what students are thinking or what they're doing. And she instilled in me a sense of obligation, both to the public and to her, that I would educate both young, old, and in between.
I was going to say, I am no
Absolutely.
longer a
Oh, no.
student,
Yeah.
but I am a lifelong learner.
Absolutely, me too.
Yeah.
And so I'm very pleased to be with you this morning.
That is so fantastic. Well, thank you for that fun fact. I really appreciate that. All right, so tell us a little bit about last night. President Trump addressed Congress. It was the longest speech ever given by any president. I'm not surprised by that, And tell us a little bit about what it was like. What was the feeling? Obviously, we knew it was going to be a little bit tense and a little bit of ruckus around some of the things that went on. What was it like being there in that room?
It was really interesting because it wasn't as tense as I thought it might be. And the reason was that, with the exception of Al Green trying to get everybody stirred up, you could sense the Democrats were just flat. They understand that what their message is not working. I mean, this is my take on it. They didn't say this, but you could just read the body language. The fizz wasn't there. And I was here when Trump 1 was in office, and they were all fired up, and they were always doing stuff. Yesterday it was more like, okay, here we are. They don't seem to have a message. And obviously Trump delivered a golden message. He came out with plans, and what I'm going to do is try to complement those plans. That doesn't mean everything will be identical to what Trump laid out last night, but I think the House's job is to complement his plans, work to make that agenda, which the American people endorsed, a reality. And a part of that is, and a lot of people don't understand this, and they get confused, a part of that was no status quo. So when you look at Elon Musk and you look at all the things that he's doing fast, that was the direction he said he would take America in, and that's what he's doing. Will it all be correct? Even Musk has said, we're not going to get it all right. We're going to have to go back in and redo some things. But sitting still or waiting to see if this is the perfect solution is not what the American people want. They sense the country's going down the drain. They want it stopped. Trump has put a plug in the drain and is now trying to figure out how to solve the problems.
And I think you bring up a really good point, which is you don't often hear from other politicians that we may not get it right the first time, but we're going to keep trying to do this for all of the Americans. What do you feel like is working? What are you feeling like? Because you're on some very powerful committees up here. And, well, first of all, why don't we say that? Let's talk about what committees you're on.
So I'm on Energy and Commerce, which has huge jurisdiction. It has broadband, it has healthcare, it has professional sports, it has the Olympic sports, it has manufacturing, telecom. I mean, you name it, we have a finger in it. It is a huge committee with huge jurisdiction. Then I serve on the Rules. I'm vice chairman of the Rules Committee with Virginia Fox as the chairwoman. And then I'm also on House Admin, where I serve on that committee. And House Admin is not a sexy committee, and you don't think it does a lot, but it has jurisdiction over a lot of things, like elections. Election law comes through there, Capitol Police, security here, that type of thing. So I have a pretty busy agenda.
Right.
The busier I am, the happier I am. So I'm thrilled with that.
When do you take your naps?
Big. Well, sometimes you get one in a chair here or there.
Yeah.
If I can grab 30 seconds, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. Well, Winston Churchill took one every day.
He did.
Yep. Okay.
He also only slept 4 hours. I sleep a little bit more than that.
Yeah, me too. All right. So tell us a little bit about what you have going on today, because I think this is also a good learning point for people who are tuning in and listening.
So, of course, we were up late last night because I'm an early riser. And then today, I've already had some meetings, and then we're doing this interview. Then I will go to the floor shortly after 12. And then there are 2 hours of debate, 1 hour each on two different Congressional Review Acts, which is an opportunity for us to take a regulation and repeal it if it's been done within the last 90 legislative days. And we have a whole slew of those because the Biden administration came in late in the year and did all kinds of things. The one that I'm carrying two today, but one of them is actually my bill.
Before you get into that,
yes, ma'am.
So this is the stuff you see on C-SPAN, right?
That's the stuff you see on C-SPAN.
Yeah.
And it's not always that exciting, but it's important.
Right. Why is it important?
Well, it's important because if we can roll back some of these regulations, and it actually may affect some of the folks in your area, because the one I'm carrying is about tire manufacturing and putting new regulations at the tire manufacturers, which is going to cost them money. Some manufacturers may even have to curtail the number of tires and the number of workers they have in order to meet the regulations, because the equipment they can't get put on the plants fast enough. It's expensive equipment. And the EPA issued this on November 29th. November 29th. The election's over. They're just throwing stuff out there. And they don't even have data that shows that it benefits the air quality. They used proxy information. Well, this is what the EPA has done for years. They come in and they throw something together. I mean, you're not going to believe this. Y'all won't believe this. It's crazy stuff. A few years ago, they tried to use the Clean Air Act to say that they could regulate the trailer part of a tractor trailer. The code says it has to be a self-propelled motor vehicle. The trailer's not self-propelled.
No.
It's not a motor vehicle. Without the tractor, it don't go anywhere. And they tried to regulate that. Of course, the courts slapped them down. But what happens is they had manufacturers starting to change their processes to try to do things that the EPA wanted them to do. And they cost people jobs by doing this. But this is the pattern at the EPA over the last 20 years, is they'll just throw some out there and see if it sticks and see if it happens, if it works, or if it gets past the court things. And sometimes that costs lots of jobs. Sometimes it only costs a few. But I will tell you, they had a regulation about a decade ago that shut down the Glen Lynn APCO power plant. Now, it was an older plant. It was only used at the time for those high stress periods, the high peak periods. But because of an EPA rule, they had to shut the plant down. Approximately a month after the plant shut down, the Supreme Court ruled the EPA didn't do it correctly and overturned the regulation that shut them down. But they're not going to reopen the plant. They've already moved all the switches. They've already taken the important equipment out. They've shut it down. As a result, last year, the little town of Glen Lynn gave up its charter and went back to being an unincorporated census area as opposed to being a town, because they lost population, they lost businesses, because, you know, people working at the plant bought lunch. They sometimes would buy a car. They might buy furniture in the nearby communities. And we've seen a drop in the economic vitality of that part of Giles County. Why? Because the EPA went out and did something they weren't supposed to do in the first place, and those people lost their jobs. So this is important. And my CRA today, my Congressional Review Act, is trying to make sure we keep jobs, and it directly impacts the Goodyear plant in Danville, Virginia, where I suspect some of the people watching this may have a friend or a relative who works there. And this will make sure that we're not putting extra stress on that plant, which may cause them to curtail their production. We don't want that. And if they got away with it, and I got in a little bit of trouble for this in the Rules Committee, because I was talking about the Yokohama tire plant in my hometown of Salem, Virginia. And Yokohama's not big enough to hit the target. But here's what happens with the EPA. If we don't push back today and say, no, not allowing that, then in a year or two, or after Trump's no longer in office, somebody at the EPA will say, well, we did it to the big plants, let's do it to the medium-sized plants. And we've done this to ourselves, which is why we have so many products that you can't buy that are American, because we say for a marginal gain, and in this case, no evidence of any gain at all in air quality or pollution control, for a little teeny gain, we're going to send all our jobs to Asia or to Mexico. And then what happens is we can't find an American product to buy because we put them out of business. Oh, and by the way, did I mention? If you're manufacturing in China, you don't have any of the controls we have.
Right.
And there's a NASA study, it's about 15 years old now, that it takes the air from the middle of the Gobi Desert in China to get to the eastern shore of Virginia in 10 days. So they're sending that pollution over. In fact, most people don't know this. The largest amount of mercury pollution on the west coast of the United States is coming from Asia.
Really?
It's not manufacturing there. And there's some exceptions. There are some exceptions. But the majority of it is really, you can say, east of the Mississippi, a significant percentage of the mercury in the air is coming from Asia. Because they don't do the things that we would do to keep our plants even moderately clean for the really important stuff. Mm-hmm. And yet the EPA is out there straining at gnats and not paying any attention to the huge amount of pollution coming out of China or other Asian countries. And so we kill our jobs for what gain in the world environment? Not much.
Okay, so you bring up China, Mexico.
Yep.
I gotta ask.
Yep.
Tariffs.
Yep.
Thoughts?
Well, I hope we can work something out with Mexico, and I hope we can work something out with with Canada. I don't really care about China. And part of the reason is that they cheat. They don't follow the rules that they set up. Their pollution control, for example, we've heard stories where, if somebody's coming to visit, somebody goes in the back room and turns the controls on. They're not always operating. Mm-hmm. They're building all kinds of coal-fired power plants without any of the technology that we know is available and that we have and that we use in this country on the plants that are currently operating. Mm-hmm. And if their equipment is at all electronic, they're using it to collect data and spy on Americans. So why would we be upset if we encourage American manufacturing and don't get cheap spy products from China? Now, I hope we work it out with Canada and Mexico. They're our neighbors. We ought to try to work something out. Now, with Mexico, they got to help us on the fentanyl problem on the southern border. Canada has a little bit of that. More importantly, though, we have lots of issues this is bringing up that people don't know. I mean, one of the Canadian provincial leaders said, well, we'll just cut off energy to New York and I think Michigan and Minnesota. Well, why are they buying energy from Canada?
Yeah.
Because we won't allow us to produce it in this country.
Right.
Because New York won't allow gas pipelines to take natural gas to a power plant in New York, so they got to buy from Canada where they can get the power, where even Canada understands they need electricity, and that there have to be some offsets and some compromise on strict rules sometimes in order to produce that electricity. They understand it, and now they want to use it as a weapon. A provincial leader said that. We're going to use it as a weapon against the United States. The United States needs to wake up and realize we need to take care of us, and we need to make sure, I'm happy to share and help other countries, but we need to take care of the United States first.
And Congressman, do you feel like it's one of those things where we've kind of let it go on for too long, and now there might be some growing pains currently?
There will be some growing pains.
But in the long run, big picture, it's better off.
Absolutely, it's better off. I mean, I would encourage every entrepreneur out there to keep an eye on this stuff. If it's something being made in China and you know how to manufacture it, start thinking about opening up a side business. See how it goes. I'm not saying go and invest all your money and all your worldly possessions right now, but keep an eye on it, because if you have the skill set, or if you know a way to make a better mousetrap, and all of them are being made in China today. I don't know about mousetraps. That's an example. It's just it's a apocryphal example.
Fun game though.
Yeah, but the bottom line is, Americans are very ingenious, and we can figure out all kinds of things. And now that it looks like there's going to be an even playing field, instead of having dumping done, and we've seen dumping in our region. The furniture industry has been devastated by dumping from Asia for years. In fact, they won a lawsuit 15, 20 years ago against the Chinese for dumping furniture and putting American manufacturing out. Mm-hmm. You throw a little tariff on China, you'll see our furniture industry get a little stronger. It will take a year or two. The big furniture factories aren't going to be able to, even the ones that are still open, aren't going to be able to turn on a dime and suddenly start producing 20% more. But in the long run, we'll have more jobs, we'll have more money in our economy, we will have the ability to take care of our own needs, and we won't be dependent on any country, whether it be China or Canada or Mexico threatening us that they won't give us a product we need. No, we'll do it ourselves.
Well,
thank you very much.
Would you say it's almost equivalent to building a log cabin house? You know, at first it takes a little bit of work. You just feel like it's going slow, log by log by log, but eventually you have 4 walls and a door, and it's all your own hard work.
That's a great example.
You can steal that. It's not copyrighted.
I'll steal it.
Okay.
I'll steal it. That's a great example. And the bottom line is, as the president said, be patient. There's going to be some stress, but we will get through this, and in the end, the country's going to be a lot better off. And I hope, again, that particularly with Canada and Mexico, we get it worked out sooner than later, but it's all about whether or not they're willing to come to the table and recognize you can't keep sending products in here with low tariffs and then have our products going into Canada or into Mexico with higher tariffs. It's not fair play. And if they give us a fair playing field, at least they're not spying on us all the time.
Yeah.
I
tell my kids that all the time, and they don't believe me. They're like, oh, Mom. I can't tell you. That's like the favorite line in our
All
house.
I can tell you is that Energy and Commerce on TikTok had a secure briefing.
Yeah.
I can't tell you everything that was said, but we came out.
Uh-huh.
And the vote immediately after the hearing was unanimous. Democrats and Republicans voted to force ByteDance, the parent of TikTok, to sell. TikTok's a wonderful product. They did come up, that was a really ingenious idea of theirs. But the Chinese Communist Party is on the board of directors. They are gaining your data. They tried to put up some things that said, oh, no, TikTok America's not doing that.
Yeah.
I cut through that in one of our committee hearings
Yeah.
and said, do you have the same attorneys? Yeah.
Yeah.
So the attorney for ByteDance can ask the attorney who works with him or her for TikTok America, give me the information.
Yeah.
And they give it to them, and we never know about it because it's protected by attorney-client privilege.
Yeah.
If you're sharing attorneys with no firewall, there is no firewall.
Yeah.
And there is no protection. So there's no question they're collecting American data. And I got a long story I won't tell you on the show, but if you want it later, we'll do it.
Okay.
But historically, collection of data about somebody who might be an adversary down the road is an extremely effective way of defeating your adversary, whether it be 5 years or 10 years from now.
Oh.
Or 20.
Yeah. Well, so this is how old I am. I know what TikTok is. I don't even know what ByteDance is.
Oh, ByteDance is the parent company.
Okay.
So what happened is, of course, see, the product in China.
What a name.
Yeah. The product in China is not allowed. It's BYTE, ByteDance. The product in China that's the TikTok in China, they don't allow all the stuff that goes on in the U.S. Oh, no. They have strict controls on it. So in the U.S., they have all this stuff, but we have reason to believe that they're collecting data from all the Americans who use TikTok, and that data can be used at a later time to influence Americans or to actually take advantage of some data piece that we may not think is important today, but then in a conflict, if they decide to go into Taiwan or if there's some other issue going on, they know where the pinch point is. They know that we need them for some reason.
Right.
And it gives them power. And we're empowering the Chinese with all kinds of electrical drones, etc., are suspect of having devices implanted in them, if they're made in China, that send information back to the Chinese Communist Party. Because in China, it's the law. You have to share the information with the government, and on most of their major companies, there's a member of the Chinese Communist Party on the board of directors. It is the law.
And what do you say, 2 more questions.
Yeah.
What do you say to people who are like, oh, well, they can collect my information. I don't have anything to hide.
Well, and what I would say is, look, I don't have anything to hide. You know, I'm sure that they've gotten into some of my stuff.
I feel like that's a standard teenager response.
It is a standard teenager response. Here's the problem. When you take all of that data, and you put it into a combination, you suddenly know a lot about what's going on in Winston-Salem. You know a lot of what's going on in my hometown of Salem, Virginia. Maybe you know a lot of what's going on in Johnson City, Tennessee, or Lynchburg, Virginia. Did you know the workings of all the nuclear fleet for the United States Navy starts near Johnson City, Tennessee, and Lynchburg, Virginia?
I had no idea.
And so you start gathering all that information. I'll bet there's a lot of really neat stuff going on in Winston-Salem. And as they gain information on movements of people, on things that are said that in any one piece might not be a big deal, you suddenly start putting it all together. You use AI, you put all this stuff together, all of a sudden you can figure out when is the time that we can most likely have an impact by turning off the power in Winston-Salem.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's fascinating is this year, this is the first year, my kiddo had to sign something saying he would not use AI for his papers and whatnot, which was just mind-boggling that we would even have to sign something. Okay, so speaking of school, what do you think your mom would say to you today, knowing how many people you're impacting, how many people you're influencing, how many people you're helping, not just kids, but everyone? What would she say to you?
Well,
I wish she was here.
she would, yeah, me too. She would remind me that I'm not always right, but she would appreciate the fact that I'm talking with people and making sure that people get educated on the way the government works. I'm big on process. I'm big on people being educated. A republic based on democratic principles does not work if we have an uninformed electorate. So I'm glad y'all are watching, and I'm glad you're doing this because people need to know.
They do.
Whether we agree or disagree,
That's
it's
right.
not the issue.
That's right.
Be informed.
Yep.
Study it. If it sounds so crazy that you don't think it's true, investigate it.
Mm-hmm.
It might be or it might not be, but make your own mind up.
And that's what we're doing. We're sending people to government websites, not news outlets, but government websites where you can get factual information. And so, Congressman, we so appreciate your time. I know you've got a lot on your schedule. And like the Congressman said, it's so important to arm yourself with information so that you can use your voice, because your voice is important. You've been watching the Jill Berlin Show. Find your voice, Government 101.